Hey traders, welcome back. For this weekend's analysis, I will start with the big picture, then do a quick review of last week's price action, and then I'll end with some ideas for next week. So let's start with DXY first on the monthly time frame. So nothing really has changed since my last video, my last weekend analysis video, and as you can see, we're bullish on the monthly time frame. We've pulled back into the monthly breaker block. We've also come into a monthly fair value gap. We've manipulated the lows, reacted, and started to push up. So looking at this, it seems like we're bullish. I'm not sure if that's how it's going to play in the long term, but clearly this is what we can see on this time frame. And if we go to EU on the same time frame, on the monthly time frame, we have the exact opposite picture. So you can see heavily bearish, swept liquidity, reversed for a pullback. We've come into the breaker block. We've also come into OT. Sorry, I forgot to mention that on DXY as well. So at DXY as well, we've come back into not OT but close to it. We were just above the 61.8 and then had that reaction. So sorry about that. Going back to EU. So yes, on EU we've hit OTE and we had a massive reaction off that. And as you can see, the next candle we're pushing lower and lower. So I mean, on this time frame, it clearly looks like this is just a pullback and we're gonna start to push to the downside from here. So obviously if we go with the higher time frames, we're bearish. Now if we go back to DXY on the daily time frame, so some of the things I talked about in last week's video have already happened. So I was looking at this area as my clear draw on liquidity. So we've already hit that and we've already had a huge reaction off of it, two of them. We hit it on Thursday and came down really deep, but thereafter we pushed up even higher, but as you can see, after coming up higher we've come right back down. So if it reverses, I mean, potentially we may be done already. Potentially we've hit our draw liquidity and start to come down for a bigger pullback or potentially a reversal from here. But unfortunately, it's not consistent with what we see on EU. So if we look at EU on the daily time frame, so on the daily time frame, what I've been saying is this right here is our draw on liquidity. So this is the key area that I want to see EU come to before it starts reversing. But as you can see on Friday, we came lower and had a massive reaction, creating that huge wick. So it remains to be seen what happens next. But when we get to the lower time frames, it starts to make a little more sense. So I'm going to ignore DXY for the time being for the rest of the video because I want to focus on some of the interesting price action that we've been seeing on EU. So if we go down to the 4-hour time frame, not really so much to say. You can see that we've had a pullback to clear the inefficiency here and then started to push lower, but most of my analysis that I have for this video is on the hourly time frame. So if we look on the hourly time frame, so what you can see is we had this massive displacement over here, creating this right here is a 4-hour fair value gap. And then after that we pushed down again, not breaking the low until here, and then after that we had a pullback coming back to the inefficiency and thereafter coming right back down. But what's more interesting than that is once we broke this low right here, we saw some really interesting structure forming. So first of all, we took the inefficiency here on the 4-hour, pushed down, and then we started a pullback, perfect pullback into OTE, started to reverse, but no, we didn't continue down as expected. Instead, we had news coming this week, creating this fuckery. So huge move up, huge move down, huge move back up, and then after that, a huge move back down. And then what happened after that? So things started to return back to normal. We had our pullback back into OTE of this daily range. And then after that, it started to continue to the downside. And then ever after, it's been extremely clean. So here's our daily range from here to here. And then we get our pullback back into OTE. And then after that, what happens? We reverse, come down, and create a lower low. And then what happens then? You guessed it. We had our pullback, comes back into OTE, barely misses the 618 from what I can see here. Yeah, barely missed the 618, but was in premium, and thereafter started the reversal again. And once again, we created a lower low. So this was on Friday. At this point, I thought, it's going to go for the draw on liquidity tonight. But what happened after? Massive pullback. And I was actually looking for shorts in this area, thinking it's going to continue. But unfortunately, the breaker setup didn't work in this instance, because what happened thereafter, it just continued up. So it continued up all the way back into fair value, and then it's done a lot of consolidating or accumulating. And what I'm going to be looking for next is, obviously I'm still bearish. I still want this draw on liquidity to be hit, preferably price to come into this 4-hour fair value gap, and then thereafter that's going to be the critical point on what happens next. But I'll get to that in a minute. So anyways, let me go to the 15-minute and show you what I'll be looking for on Monday. So for Monday, as I said, we've already done a lot of accumulation in this zone, or in this range, sorry. And thereafter, you can see, okay, it's starting to break down now. But this was at the very end of the day. So market closed on this candle. You can see a huge wick before ending the day. But then what happens next? So on Monday, what I want to see is I want to see the range broken. I want to see a clear shift. And then after that, that's my confirmation. Price is going to come down from this level. But where can I enter the trade? So looking at this, I have a few areas that I'm looking at. So we have a 15-minute fair value gap that it didn't reach on this wild wick before the market closed. And this is a clear area of liquidity, so resting liquidity, that price is very likely to come back to and sweep before going down. So this fair value gap is my first area to look for shorts. And then depending on what happens here, it may continue higher and come into this 5-minute supply zone, and from there it may shift and we get our shorts to take it down to the draw on liquidity. But one other scenario I'm looking at, especially if we're still back in this range during London. So say we get our pullback in Asia, it pushes down, fails to break the low, and just hangs out in this area, and then Frankfurt Open, we start to get a pullback. I'm thinking if the price lingers that long in this range, we may have another sweep, so another manipulation of this range. So price sweeping all these highs right here, coming in to the extreme. So we have a 15-minute supply zone right here, tap into there, and then start to shift and reverse from there. And obviously I would expect continuation throughout the rest of the day if it remains bearish. And ultimately, I mean, we've come so low at this point. I mean, how much are we talking about? It can't be more than 15 pips, right? So we have 12 pips. So we're looking at 12 more pips to hit that draw on liquidity, and 18.5 pips to come into that 4-hour fair value gap. 40 pips to fill that fair value gap. And if we're talking from this area where we expect the shorts to come from, I mean, even if it comes from the supply, that's 80 pips. So worst case scenario, we're only talking about a move of 80 pips. EU can easily do that in one day. And looking at the way it's been pulling back right into the OTE and then coming down, breaking down lower, I mean, this just makes so much sense. So continue with the bearish sentiment for the time being, but ultimately the main area that I am watching for is what happens here. What happens after it hits a draw of liquidity? What happens after it comes into this fair value gap? Do we have a massive reaction after that? Or do we have a small reaction after that, which could signal further pushes to the downside? So this is a key thing that I'll be watching for early next week, because I really want to see what happens after that draw on liquidity is hit and whether we get a reversal or not. Because my idea right now is the moment we get a lower time frame shift, I'll be focusing on longs. Because if we are able to hit the draw on liquidity, I mean, regardless, we should have a reaction, right? If we come into, if we break structure again, then sweep the draw on liquidity, maybe even come into the fair value gap. With that much liquidity taking, it's very likely, at worst, that we get a massive, that we get a massive reaction after. Whether it's a reversal or not, doesn't really matter. The main thing is we're going to get a nice trade regardless. Because say if this is the range, this is a range that'll be the new daily range that'll be created after the draw on liquidity is taken. I mean, worst case scenario, we get all of this. We get all of this. What is that? Jeez. That in itself is a 45 pip move. So we can bank 45 pips regardless of if this continues to the upside or comes right back down. So for me, what I'll probably do for next week, I'll look for that shift, then start to look for longs. Once it comes back into OT, I'll take half off, and then after that, I'm going to let the rest run. If it comes back down and creates a lower low, then obviously I'm going to lose out on half the profits I could have gotten. But if it comes back and mitigates something in this area, and thereafter reverses, then I can just hold that trade potentially to here and potentially to here. So that would be a massive move if I'm right in saying this is a draw on liquidity, this is where price is going to reverse from. So keeping in mind the monthly time frame is completely against this idea, because the monthly idea shows that price is more than likely to come back down from here. But if we look at the daily is still clearly bullish, and this is the OTE area of this entire leg, which would make sense for us to have a reversal to continue back to the upside. And again, seasonal tendencies show that from September we're likely to see EU to continue until December, till the end of the year. So anyways, those are my ideas for the time being. I am bearish until we get into this area, and then after that, once we start to have our first reaction and first shift, I'll be looking for longs, and I'll continue to look for longs until that low is broken again, and then I switch back to bearish and continue bearish until there's a reason to start looking for longs. So potentially I may lose some trades here trying to catch a huge move to the upside, but it'll definitely pay off if I'm able to catch that move, and if the price does continue to the upside like I think it will. So anyways, those are my ideas, long term, short term, mid-term, and what I'm looking at for the coming week. I hope you guys found it interesting, and hope you guys got some knowledge out of it as well. And as usual, if you have any ideas or comments that you want to mention, please feel free to comment below on this video. And at the same time, if you have any constructive feedback, please feel free to add that in the comments as well. Anyways, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I'll catch you for the next one. Peace. Hey, you made it to the very end. Thanks for that. If you could do me one more favor and click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, it'll allow the YouTube algos to kick in and help this channel grow. Thanks again. Cheers.